Discovery of the Merneptah stela was not the only reason making 1896 a momentous year in the life of Petrie. He returned to England later that year and was engaged in writing up his findings. A friend brought to him a certain Hilda Urlan to assist with some of the drawings. A romance ensued, and at the age of 43, Petrie and Hilda were married November 26, 1896. Hilda was well suited to the life of an archaeologist, making herself very much at home in the rustic environments. She continued to help with marking and drawing numerous objects that turned up in the course of excavation. One of the skills that Petrie accumulated over these decades of excavation was the ability to distinguish styles of pottery and correlate them to chronological eras. He estimated that in his research in Palestine alone, he had reviewed some 50,000 pieces of pottery, and as far as Egypt is concerned, some 3 million pieces of pottery. That extent of exposure definitely puts him in the master category and would generate an intuitive sense of a recognition of detail and mental classification. Keep in mind the credit given him earlier by Drower that he had an uncanny ability in the area of visual memory. Another skill he had was the recognition of forgeries. Drower notes that his knowledge of ancient techniques and craftsmanship enabled him to detect the work of a modern forger, and he could often put a name to the man who had made an object, though he was seldom dogmatic. His assessment, when someone commended a particular artifact to be purchased, he might say, "I wouldn't like to buy it." His skills in detecting forgeries were not without exception. There was one instance when a large scarab came up for auction. In this scarab, there was an inscription which depicted the original owner's participation in a sailing voyage going around Africa back in the reign of Pharaoh Necho, 7th century BC. For his part, Petrie was convinced that it was authentic. But later on, some scholars with more distinct ability in the grammar of the Egyptian language were able to detect that linguistically this was a forgery, with the inscribed message having been cobbled together from various ancient sources. During World War I, 1914 to 1919, he was unable to proceed with on-site excavation. Consequently, he worked on publication. And it's during this period that he developed and more formalized his systems of sequence dating that was based on the shape of artifacts, how they were decorated, and what type of artifacts they were. In 1926, he returned not to Egypt, but to spend time in Palestine. Especially significant from this period are the finds at Tel El Ajul, which is in Gaza. Drower includes this Tel El Ajul photo showing in black and white a few of the gold artifacts that were retrieved. It comes to life a bit more with this photograph from the British Museum. Notice the triangular pendant on the center left and the starburst. Those are similar, although close examination shows they are not the identical artifacts in this black and white photo. If you're wondering the difference, notice the triangular has rounded shoulders, whereas this one has more angular shoulders. What we're looking at here then are necklace pendants, earrings, and various other sorts of jewelry. Here you can see some of the beaded work, very small balls of gold that have been impressed either into the bird figure or the collar-shaped items, which perhaps were earrings. Here's a placard introducing the portions of the Tel Ajul hoard that were acquired by the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. Notice in particular the description on the left, and I hope as you get acquainted with archaeologists in the course of your studies, it will prepare you to encounter placards like this. And then notice the detail where the finder, Sir W.M. Flinders Petrie, that's William Matthew Flinders Petrie, is credited as the archaeologist recovering this treasure hoard. Because of your familiarity with his life, you can appreciate more, as if seeing in 3 dimension, the artifacts that are displayed in Oxford. The listing on the right helps us appreciate some of the distinct features of the jewelry that are shown there. That information will appear again in a later slide. Here then are some of the artifacts from Tel Ajul that are on display in Oxford. Notice some similarity with those found in the British Museum in London, such as the star pendant and also the triangular Astarte pendant. Similarly, the circular beaded earring. Very, very detailed work. Now we can review in parallel both the artifacts and also the helpful description of the detailed craftsmanship. I'll leave this on for a few seconds so that you can read that over and appreciate what you're looking at. You may wish to pause the video at this point if you'd like to read that over further. In 1935, at age 82, Flinders Petrie retired and resided at the American School in Jerusalem. It was the perfect setting for his retirement. Jauer writes, "Life at the school was pleasant. Meals were taken in the communal dining room, afternoon tea in the cool, shady garden. Apart from the modest boarding fee, they had few expenses. When invited to take tea or dine with some member of the Jerusalem community, they usually walked there and back. Petrie's extraordinary energy had still not deserted him. Though his once springy step was now a shuffle, slowly he could manage the hilly streets of Jerusalem." After his birthday at age 86, he writes this to his daughter, "Another milestone of life at 86. Happily, it is life in good health, but only bothered by knees and eyes giving way a little. I am still getting on with finishing up the books which are in hand. The Architecture and Making of Egypt are done. The Science of Egypt is at the printers. Gaza, Volume 5, is nearly ready. Only Mammy is finishing some drawings. 2 or 3 books are nearly ready, so I am pretty well clearing the decks before the old ship goes down." And it did go down in 1942. He's buried at the British Cemetery in Mount Zion. Resources that you may find helpful if you'd like to dig a little further into his life. First of all, I'd highly commend to you the actual diaries of Flinders Petrie. In this archive, you'll find photocopy and then in parallel page, full transcription. You get a sense of his daily experiences. He was fairly explicit and thorough. You'll find times when he's recording measurements of the pyramids or the king's chamber within the Great Pyramid. You'll find sketches. At times he'll sketch out a hieroglyph that he noticed or the shape of a particular artistic artifact. And he includes that right in his fountain pen diaries. Next, Margaret Drower's biography that has been drawn from multiple times during this presentation is a wealth of information and exceptionally readable. It's just a fascinating biographical read. Of a shorter sort is Valerie Fargo's article of a biographical sort in the Biblical Archaeologist.